Hi, and welcome to Crafts with Ash. My name's Ashley, and today I'm going to bring you 5 Farmhouse Valentine DIYs. Now, I'm not really a farmhouse person, but I always like to throw a few in there for my farmhouse fans. So if you like this video, please don't forget to give it a thumbs up, then subscribe to my YouTube channel, and hop on over to Facebook and find my page, Crafts with Ash DIY and Decor, and give it a like and a follow. So let's get started. For this first DIY, I used this heart from the Dollar Tree that has this metal word, love, on it, and a piece of scrapbook paper that I got from Hobby Lobby for 25 cents. The first thing I did was take off that love metal plaque with my scraper. It did take a little bit of muscle, but it just popped right off after I got it started. Then I cut off the hanger and traced my heart onto the scrapbook paper. Now, it did help to put the heart at an angle, that way the whole thing fit. After I traced it, I went ahead and cut it out. After my heart was cut out, I took some Mod Podge and I gave my heart a nice thin layer of that. Then I went ahead and put the paper right on top. Now, I did make sure to pay attention to the edges on my heart to make sure that it didn't flop up. Next, I took my sanding block that I got from the Dollar Tree and I sanded all the edges down to give it a nice clean cut wherever the paper was hanging over. Now, for this, I wanted to make sure to sand in the down direction. That way, it gets a nice clean edge. Then I took my Mod Podge again and just reinforced all the edges. After that, I decided that I wanted my edges to be black, so I took a makeup sponge with black acrylic paint and just painted over the edges. Next, I took that metal word that came off of the front of the sign and I gave it a nice coat of white Waverly chalk paint. Actually, I believe I gave it 2 coats. After my word was dry, I took that makeup sponge again that had the black acrylic paint and I just carefully rubbed it all around the word. I very lightly, with barely any pressure or any paint on the sponge, just gave it a nice little brushing. Next, I took this roll of burlap ribbon that I got from the Dollar Tree and I measured it to go across my heart. Now, I did measure it at an angle, so it was kind of diagonal just a little bit. Now, I cut off the edges of the ribbon to give it a frayed edge, and to make it look even more frayed, I went ahead and pulled off the string on each of the edges. Then by using hot glue, I went ahead and hot glued the burlap down to my heart. Now, you want to very carefully do this, so I used a craft stick to push it down because obviously you could get burnt doing this, so just be really careful. Then I took my word and hot glued that on top of the burlap. Next, I flipped the heart over, and by using some twine, I made a hanger for my sign. I just cut off a piece of twine and hot glued the ends down right in the middle of my heart. Then I went ahead and cut off a little bit of that brown paper that I'm working on and put it over the ends of the twine just to reinforce it a little bit. To make my sign complete, I decided it needed a bow. So I took an assortment of different burlap ribbons that I got from the Dollar Tree, and I cut 2 pieces off of each ribbon. Now, I wasn't really measuring here, I just cut different lengths, so that way I could form an X, and I'm just gonna make a messy bow. Now, for the straight burlap ribbon, I did go ahead and cut the edges off again and pull the strings out to make that fraying effect. Once I got all my ribbons cut out, I arranged them in a fat X. I didn't really have a pattern here, I just wanted to make sure that 2 of the same fabrics didn't land on top of each other. Then I took a small piece of twine and tied it together in the middle. Now you want to make sure to tie it really, really tight. After that, I fluffed out and kind of arranged all the ribbons how I liked it, and then gave them all dovetails. After completing my bow, I did realize that it was a little long, so I went ahead and trimmed it up just a little bit. Now, I'm not really a bow maker, so this did take a little bit of practice for me to get down, and I still don't think that I make the best bows, but I do try my hardest. So whenever I do make bows, this is kind of my go-to because it is the easiest one to make. You just have to arrange it in your hand, kind of how you like it. It's kind of just all trial and error, but then you get it down. After I felt like my bow was finally complete, I took a small piece of twine and just tied it in a shoelace bow. Then I went ahead and hot glued that on top of the other bow. I think this sign is the perfect farmhouse Valentine DIY, and with that little touch of red in there, it gives it a little bit of fun too. So, what do you think? This next DIY is so easy to make and it only cost $1. So I picked up this XOXO sign from the Dollar Tree, and the first thing I did was cut off the tag on the back. Then I took some duct tape, or you can use painter's tape, and I duct taped off so only the bottom of the XOXO was showing. Now the top of the X is showing, but I'm only paying attention to the bottom of those letters. Then by using Waverly chalk paint in white, I went ahead and painted the bottom of the XOXO. After my paint was all dry, I went ahead and peeled off the tape. And that was it. That completed my DIY. What do you think? In the next DIY, I started off by using one of these box signs from the Dollar Tree. Now this had a 3D flower on it, so I went ahead and popped that off by using my scraper. Then I flipped it over and got the majority of the tag off. I didn't really worry about getting the whole thing off, but I did want to get a good chunk of it off. And to do this, I used my hairdryer and my little scraper. After that, I took some black acrylic paint and painted the entire sign with that. Now I made sure to go around all the edges, the insides, but I didn't really worry about the back. That I just left how it was. But I did give this 2 coats of black acrylic paint. After my sign was completely dry, I took this really pretty handwriting scrapbook paper from Hobby Lobby and I put it on the inside of this sign and kind of made an indent with my fingernail, and then I went in with a craft stick. Then I went ahead and cut it out as close to the indents as possible. Now if you notice the inside of that, you can tell I had to do this twice. So I ripped off the first time. This is my second attempt doing this, but after I cut out my little square, I kept measuring it to the inside and just making cuts where necessary until it was a perfect fit. Once I got my paper all cut down, I took some Mod Podge and gave the bottom of my sign a coat of that. Then I took my paper and pressed it right on top. Now you can see I got a little black paint at the bottom, but that's okay. I guess it just made it more of a farmhousey look. Then I took my Mod Podge and went over the edges and the corners to make sure that that paper was completely pressed down. Next, I took one of these hearts from the Make Your Own ornament set, and I think it came in a pack of 8 actually, and I painted one of them with black acrylic paint. Then I took 2 of the tumbling tower blocks and painted each of those with black paint as well. Next, to give my heart a distressed look, I took my sanding block and really sanded down the edges to bring up the natural wood. Then I did the same thing on the outsides of my sign as well. Next, by using my white chalk marker that I actually got from the Dollar Tree, I wrote P.S. I love you on that black heart. Then I took one of the tumbling tower blocks and I made sure it was the one where I had painted black over the top of it, and I hot glued it underneath my heart to hide the hole. Then I went ahead and hot glued the other one at the bottom of the heart, then hot glued the whole thing in the middle of my sign. Next, I took my chalk marker again and I just kind of lightly brushed around the edges of the sign itself and the heart. I think this little sign is so romantic, and it was so easy to make, but it has such a special meaning for the loved one in your life. What do you think? For my next DIY, I took a package of craft sticks that I got from the Dollar Tree and one of these little grapevine heart wreaths that I also got in a pack from the Dollar Tree. We're going to make a little stand-up sign. So the first thing I did was take 2 of the craft sticks and cut them down to make an L. Now I did make sure to cut off the rounded edges, and then I just kind of measured it down. I have no idea what these measurements are, but I really just eyeballed the whole thing. So I made my L. And then I took the grapevine heart and kind of put it in an angle, and that is going to act as my O. Then I took another one of those craft sticks, cut off the rounded edges, and lined it up with the longer part, the vertical part of my L, to make sure that at least those match. Then I cut off 2 of those to make a V. Then I took 4 more craft sticks and I made an E by using the same method. So I made sure that the vertical parts of the L, the V, and the longer up and down part of the E were all the same size. Then I just eyeballed the other parts of the E just to see what it looked like and how I liked it. Once I got all my sticks cut down, I took my Waverly chalk paint in ivory and I lightly brushed over all the wood with that. Now, I wasn't going for full coverage here because I wanted it to look a little distressed, so I just lightly brushed over it. You can see that I'm actually holding the pieces down with another piece of that craft stick. I really love this method because then I'm not getting paint all over my fingers. So you might want to try that out. After my sticks were dry, I took my sanding block and I sanded down the edges of all the sticks and in the middle to bring up that natural wood. Next, I took some Waverly Antique Wax and a makeup sponge, and I dipped my sponge into the lid of the wax and I dipped, dabbed, and then brushed it over. So I actually took a lot of my paint off by dabbing it on that paper, as you saw, and then that way it's not full coverage, but it's just enough to give it that distressed or antiqued look. Then to blend it all in, I went over it one more time with my sanding block. Next, it was time to arrange all my letters. So I took all of the pieces and lined them up how I liked them. Of course, I spelled out L, heart, V-E. Now, I did make sure that some of the pieces overlapped, so that's why you're going to see some of them touching, but I figured if I hot glued it that way, it would give it more of a hold. It would have something to hold on to. The only thing I wish I did do different was at the bottom of the V, I wish I would have cut them off at an angle so they fit together better, but it still looked really cute how it was. I kind of decided that the E's, the top and the bottom sticks of the E was a little too long, so I went ahead and trimmed them down. After I had all my letters arranged how I liked it, I went ahead and hot glued it all down. Now, I did not glue all the letters together. I only hot glued the letter piece together, if that makes sense. So I put the L together, I put the V together, and I put the E together, but I did not hot glue them all together yet. After that, it was time to make a base for my letters. So I laid my letters out how I liked it, so I knew exactly how long to make my base. Then I took some tumbling tower blocks and I lined them all up. I ended up hot gluing 5 tumbling tower blocks together end to end, and I did 2 of those. Now you are going to see me hot glue the 2 strands, I guess, or the 2 bunches together. Do not do this. Keep them as 2 separate lengths, or I don't know what you want to call them, but leave them separate. Do not glue the 2 strands together. Again, do not glue those 2 together. Keep them separate. All right, so next I took my Waverly chalk paint in white and I painted both of my strands. Again, do this separately, do both of them separately, and I painted both of them. When I painted these, I made sure to get all edges and sides. Now, when you paint them separate, you're going to want to do the same thing. Make sure the whole thing is covered. After my blocks were dry, I went ahead and took my sanding sponge and I lightly sanded over the stand just to give it a little bit of distressing. Then I took that makeup sponge with the Waverly Antique Wax and I went ahead and brushed over the sides just a little bit, again, just to add that distressed look. Okay, so here you see I actually tore the 2 apart. Now you can see there's unfinished wood on the one side or on the insides of them. Definitely paint that white because you can kind of tell if you don't. The next thing I did was I took my letters and I hot glued them down to the back of my stand on one of the strands. Now you want to make sure to put the hot glue at the very tippy top of the bottom of the letter. I hope that makes sense. That way you can see the majority of the letter. So I'm only hot gluing at the top of the back of each strand. Then after that, and I have all my letters on, I went ahead and hot glued the back of the stand to the back of my letters. After that second piece was glued on, I went ahead and I hot glued that grapevine heart to the stand as well. Now, of course, it's only touching certain parts of my stand, so I only applied hot glue to those parts that it was touching. Finally, I took my little knife and I just kind of cleaned up some of the hot glue that spilled over. I think this sign is so cute and it definitely channels a little bit of the farmhouse rustic vibe too. What do you think? For my last DIY, I picked up this kitchen towel that I got at the Dollar Tree, and it says, "Love builds a happy home." I thought this was so farmhouse and a little rustic too. The first thing I did was cut off the tag that was on top, and then I opened the towel, kind of patted it down to make it a little flatter, cut off the tag that was inside, and then flipped it inside out so the actual print is on the inside. Then I just took my hot glue and I hot glued the sides down to each other, but I left the top open. Now you could definitely use fabric hot glue on this, and they do sell that at Hobby Lobby and I'm sure other craft stores too. And you always have the option to sew, but I don't know how to sew and I didn't have any of that fabric glue, so hot glue worked just fine. After I had the sides glued down, I went ahead and turned it right side out, I guess, and I made sure to push out the corners at my towel as well. Next, I grabbed this old pillow that we had laying around and I cut off a little piece of it. I'm going to use the stuffing. So I just took chunks and chunks of the stuffing and I just started stuffing my pillow. In hindsight, I probably could have put more stuffing in it. It was a little lumpy when I was done, but I think it still turned out really cute. Once I had enough stuffing in my pillow, I went ahead and to close this off, I just used hot glue. I tucked the outer edges in and then hot glued the outer edges together. Now here's a fun tip, and one hot glue gun burn later, I realized it was easier to go ahead and hot glue the edges down first before you try to hot glue the edges down together. This did cause me to get a little boo-boo on my hand, so then I realized it was a lot easier. So I would definitely hot glue down the edge to each other first and then hot glue the edges together. You definitely also want to pay attention to the corners. You want to make sure that that's all tucked in as well. After my edges were all glued down, I went ahead and kind of beat my pillow to make sure that all the stuffing was evenly placed. This pillow is the perfect little accent pillow to any Farmhouse Valentine home decor, and it essentially only cost me $1 to make. What do you think? Whew, I know that was a lot to hand you. So if you're still with me, I truly appreciate it. I think that all of these Farmhouse Valentine DIYs came out so great. Like I said at the beginning, I'm not really a farmhouse girl, especially for Valentine's Day. I like those touches of reds and pinks, but even I am loving all of these DIYs. You're going to have to let me know in the comments which one is your favorite. Are you a farmhouse person or do you like the traditional red and pink? Let me know. I want to thank you so much for joining me for this Farmhouse Valentine DIY tutorial. If you haven't done so already, please don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel and hit that thumbs up button. Also, don't forget to hit the notification bell so you're notified every time I upload a new video. I have a lot more content to come. Then hop on over to Facebook and find my page, Crafts with Ash, DIY and Decor, and give me a like and a follow there. Until next time, I'll craft with you soon. Bye!